everything, all these things, yeah, the Rebbe pushed it. But the Rebbe said something, Bochrim thought how to apply it, and we got it done. And that changed Lubavitch into, like, oh, when the Rebbe says something, he means it, and we mean it. We're going to try to make it happen. And it was semi-new at that time. I mean, like, no, people have been talking like this, but they never did it. Now we did it.
I'm Yossi Kamen. Welcome to Among Chassidim by Der Herr, an ongoing farbrengen about life as a chassid, our vibrant connection with the Rebbe, and inspired living shaped by the way he teaches us each and every day. Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Touger, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem.
Okay, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
I am very curious. I know much about you through your works. There's the Sichos in English, and the Rambam, and many other projects. I am not so familiar with your background, and I'm curious. You weren't born doing Sichos in English, right? So what was the story? Where were you from, and how did you start coming to where you are today?
Okay, look, all stories are stories. Family comes from Borisov. Borisov has a long history in Lubavitch. It's a small town, about 50 vers out of Minsk. Don't ask me what a vers is. It's about a kilometer or so. So Borisov is a small town, 50 vers from Minsk. It was a Lubavitch town. Shalom Beberisova is a well-known mashpia. My family was there for many generations. They were Chabad Chassidim. I've got a Torah or Siddur from my Alter Zayda. We're in Geza, real Geza, the roots, the core. That said,
it's so interesting.
Our family came to America in 1905. 1905, when you came to America, there was no official Lubavitch in America. There were Chabad shuls all over the place. Unfortunately, most of those Chabad shuls are no longer Chabad shuls because there wasn't any official leadership really until the Frierdiker Rebbe came. A couple of years before that, slightly, but not really, with Rabbi Jacobson came. But as such, there wasn't that much background around for Chassidus. So the family became American. I grew up conservative, strongly right-wing conservative Jew in Long Island. But, we knew of Torah mitzvahs. We kept a lot of it, and we didn't keep a lot of it. It's about the best. That's the nicest way of saying it. I grew up in 1960s. I mean, I was born in 1950. Grew up, quote unquote, in the 1960s. I don't have to tell you what was going through America at the end of the 1960s. It was a whole.
Did you have any Chabad identity at that point, or not? I mean, you didn't even know about it.
Not at all.
Growing up,
my father. I remember driving through Crown Heights at one point. We were going to Brooklyn for whatever purpose. My father points to 770 and says, "We come from here." But he didn't tell me anything more about that. He said, "We come from here," and I didn't understand what he meant by that. He didn't want to explain it any further, I guess. And he left us. He left with that cryptic statement. So. In Eretz Yisrael, I met Chabad Chassidim.
When you were like a teenager?
At that point, right before age 20. At that point, many Americans were looking, searching. This is, the Rebbe spoke more than anybody else really about, and definitely in the Jewish world, about looking for American searching youth. Like, I wasn't hearing those Sichos at that time, but yeah, he was speaking about me and my generation. Jewish American youth at that time, we were fueled with the 60s was full of idealism, full of energy, wanting to change. On the other hand, no direction. A lot of people were turning east. I have many friends who went to India, China, Japan, looking for roots, looking for purpose, looking for meaning. Having grown up with a strong Jewish heritage, I felt my people, before I start looking in foreign fields, my people, I owe it to my people to look there first.
So
I think
that was
that's
your own decision before. I hear from others that first they went to other places and then they went to look in their back pocket, so to speak. You're saying you on your own knew
let's put it
that
this way.
that's a
I did
good
a little
route.
bit of look in the other pockets, but I really felt that, look, I went to Colgate University. Colgate University is a very special place. One of the teachers there in Colgate, he was a guy who he studied Hinduism by spending 2 years in India. He studied in Zen by spending two years in a Zen monastery. He told me, and he taught me, don't just get caught up in a fad, swayed by a current. You want to do something, do it right, study it from the inside, let it take time. And hey, if I'm going to spend a serious amount of time looking somewhere, you don't go somewhere else first. You go home first. That was a very clear realization. Why go
That's what
someplace
he
else
told you?
before
That's what he
you'd
told
ever
you,
look?
this professor?
No, actually, he told me that. Again, this is very curious that people said hints, didn't explain it. This is, you're Jewish, you're looking for spirituality. Why don't you look into Hasidism? It's Lubavitch. He didn't tell me what Lubavitch was. It didn't really excite me very much, this idea of Hasidism, because everybody who's grown up in secular America thinks of Hasidim as something very background, you know, 18th century, 19th century, definitely not 20th century. So we didn't really, when he said Hasidism, no, I wasn't very interested. So, but he actually did say look into Lubavitch, and but it wasn't him per se. I went to Israel just to look around, and slowly but surely I met Chabad there, and they invited me to yeshiva, to yeshiva in Kfar Chabad for Shabbos. It was a little bit of an approach avoidance conflict because on one hand, I recognized that it was something real. On the other hand, it was very different. I mean, very, very different from the lifestyle that I was used to. And I had to think seriously whether I was going to actually make an experiment for this or not. I decided give it 2 weeks and then 2 months to see if it's going to sit comfortably, become real for me or not.
So what was happening in Kfar Chabad then? They had the Balshuvi yeshiva there? Like what was going on?
They had a regular yeshiva, the regular yeshiva, which is still there now. And then Rabbi Gaffney had a Balshuva program. I was lucky because I knew Hebrew. I went to a very good conservative school, so I learned Hebrew as a kid. I've been in Israel close to 6 months, so my Hebrew got better. So I was able to semi-integrate into the regular yeshiva pattern. Like a lot of the classes I went to, I looked up to Rabbi Gaffney and the Balshuva people as somewhat of guidance and the place where I felt most comfortable with, because the Israelis were definitely a different breed. That said, I could study with them. I knew the language. The Gemara was something new, but not something impossible to study. I mean, that's really like a very fundamental point. Gemara is actually very easy, and people can pick it up. They get out of the illusion that this is difficult and realize that this is easy. They can pick it up.
One
and
second,
so I did.
You realize
And
that coming
I
in
was
fresh,
no,
because I think some people in yeshiva their whole lives are not convinced that Gemara is easy.
yeah, because they look at it that way. It becomes that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you look at Torah study as easy, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And when you look at it as difficult, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. In other words, hey, I raised my kids in Israel. That's a whole second story, but I raised my kids in Israel. They were learning Gemara at age 10. Now, again, my kids are somewhat gifted, but they had classmates who weren't so gifted, and they were also learning Gemara at age 10. It's not so simple. It's not something out of the question in the ordinary in Israel. Quite the contrary, it's common. So if a 10-year-old can study this page and understand it, a 20-year-old who's been through some academic background and training can definitely understand it. And on the contrary, those people who don't really want to. And I did. My attitude was, if I'm going to do this, I'm not going to do this as a second-class citizen. Right. This is studyable. I can study it. And I did.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you, so when you're coming to Kfar Chabad and you're seeing the Bachrim, you're seeing Lubavitch, you're seeing frum Yidden, what is it that, I mean, there was a search here, right? So what is it that you're searching for and what is it that you're finding there?
Look, first of all, what I was searching for, not an I, but I say just what every Baal Tshuva is searching for, is a way to integrate your own spiritual desires, your own spiritual feeling, your own desire to come close to Hashem with your actual everyday life, how you live in this world. Now, I won't say that every person in Kfar Chabad was an exemplar of that. I wish I could, but but everyone was semi-trying in that goal, in that direction. I got to see Shlomo Chaim Kesselman. He was an exemplar in a very real way. There are different approaches among Mashpiyim. Not everybody venerated Shlomo Chaim in the same way that the people in Kfar Chabad did at that time. But hey, this was a person who davened hours. He had real feeling in his davening. I didn't, but many did. Watch him from he would go to the yeshiva, attend davening in the yeshiva, then go home and daven. I wasn't among those who went and watched him through a window at his house while he davened. Many others did. But he would daven for hours. He would sing and dance in his davening. In other words, here you had a person who, for him, Judaism was not just a religion, quote unquote. It was a fire. It was real. And he was there. There were others not quite on that level, but exemplars, people you could learn from. And I was willing to learn. And that's one of the first things. When it comes to yeshiva, you have to say, oh, this is something that I want. I want to see this, see if it's real for me, see how I can make it real. So I look at people who it's real for them. So there were many people in Kfar Chabad who had that.
So at a certain point in Kfar Chabad, you kind of migrated into the regular yeshiva? Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, more or less from the beginning.
It's like you had a relationship with the Reb Shlomo Chaim?
Somewhat, but not really. He was much. He wasn't so ill. He was sick most of the time. He passed away 6 months after I entered the yeshiva. He was back and forth in the hospital, so I didn't really get a chance to get a personal relationship with him. Well, my personal relationship was a lot with Rav Yankel Katz. Yankel was he was the mashkiach of Seder Nigla. A very special yid, mamish. Like I can tell you, like a guy who knew how to learn, loved learning. But I'll tell you a story that I had. I sent my son also to Kfar Chabad. He learned under Rav Yankel as well. He was close to Rav Yankel. It was cute. Rav Yankel never told him about he never told my son about the close relationship that he and I shared. But he obviously gave my son certain special attention. So my son wasn't great at keeping Seder, but he loved learning. So he'd come to Rav Yankel with questions in learning. So Rav Yankel says, "Oh, this is a deep point. Something I got to take time to think about it. Now it's Seder. Don't have quite much time to learn it over. When I go home at night, I'll look into it. You'll probably look into it at night also. If you call me before 11 o'clock, I'll be happy to discuss it with you. After 12, it's difficult. I used to be able to take calls, and I used to study to 1. But now I'm 80 years old. I can't do it. I can't do that anymore." Think about how a Boca hears that, how small he feels. That was the Yid Rav Yankel was. I mean, this is like a Yid at learned, and he loved learning, and he spread that, and anybody who took him seriously picked that up. Now, that's something unique. And then, of course, I studied personally under Rebbe Ashkenazi, Mordechai Ashkenazi, the Rabbi of Kfar Chabad. This was a genius of a guy. He used to come to Shir and like roll off achronim. I don't think he prepared. This was stuff that he was saying from memory. And he just had one after the other. Learning Kedushin, he said, Makna here. It was just, the guy was brilliant, encyclopedic, but also a very effective teacher. Like it was a blot shear, because Gemara, Rashi, Tosfos. Carefully, each Gemara, each line of Rashi, each line of Tosfos explained, and then peppered with achronim, rishonim, and achronim. He taught you the basics, and then how to explain the basics into deeper thought. Which was, geschmack. Chassidus, again, Chassidus, I want to say it openly, that Chassidus in Kfar Chabad it didn't have the flavor, the intellectual flavor that Chabad really is known for. To put it bluntly, they were interested in teaching you, inspiring you how to daven. I mean, I didn't hear Shlomo Chaim teach Samach Vav. But I was told that even that he would study the scholar pieces of Samach Vav fast, and then take out a small avoda to kavod and fetch the avoda. In Kfar Chabad, they were very emphasis. They were putting a high emphasis on davening, which is again very important. I mean, the Chassidish Yid has to know how to daven, but he also has to learn with what to daven, and just being inspired. Oh, there's a classic story. One of the Alter Rebbe's Chassidim davened 4 hours every Shabbos, and he was a simple person. His fellow Chassidim asked him, "What are you doing? Doing davening 4 hours?" And he told them, the Alter Rebbe teach, "Zorcha v'shomer b'dibur echad nemar." The dibur echad, the one word of Anochi Hashem Elokecha, has got to be the Zorcha v'shomer in your inner being, and that's why I daven with the 4 hours. Now, on one hand, that's very inspiring. On the other hand, as Chabad taught, it's a methodical process where you review ideas. The emotion springs from the intellect. It's not just a emotional charge. I want to come close to Hashem. So that was a little bit lacking in as a Baal Tshuva. Every Baal Tshuva is into that emotional charge, but having been being fed that on a constant basis, I felt a little bit, hey, there must be more to Chassidus than this. So I was pleased because, again, it was Chassidus, it was rich, it was Ruchnius, which is American. I was never exposed to this. Nobody taught this. On the other hand, the intellectual development of it was kind of lacking, and I felt that missing. And also, like the next point is also they kept telling us Rebbe, and like I see, it's cute. The Rebbe is in New York. I'm an American, so what am I doing in Israel? Like it became very clear to me that if this is what we're based on, go to the source. And so, after a year and a half in Kfar Chabad, I wanted to stay there long enough that I felt I could walk into 770 as one of the guys, not just the guy learning.
So basically, they say agasta favayo zeta famayo. So you come in, you see everyone's talking about the Rebbe. So what are you guys doing here? The Rebbe's in New York. Rebbe's in New York. So that's what propelled you to actually go. There's one personality in Kfar Chabad that you didn't mention yet is Mendel Futterfass. Did you have a connection with him?
Mendel didn't get to Kfar Chabad until I left. Mendel got to Kfar Chabad Tafshin Lamed Gimel. I spent a lot of time. I have a very personal relationship with Mendel from Tafshin Lamed Vav when I was in Lamed Zion, when I was in Sichos in Cleveland. But I'll get to that later, perhaps. But in that he got to Kfar Chabad, and Shlomo Chaim passed away in Tafshin Lamed. He had just gotten to England at that time, Mendel. And he came to Kfar Chabad and went to Chidus to the Rebbe. The Rebbe told him to sign a mashpia in Kfar Chabad. He looked at the Rebbe and said, I've never had mashpia for Bachrim. I was always dealing with Balabatim. The Rebbe said, Kesman is given, Epis is given. It's a dolach, geshtapalach. Those are the Rebbe's words to him. He told me that personally. In other words, he felt that he was really, this wasn't his job. The Rebbe wasn't saying that you're really pasik for a job as a mashpia, but there's a lach, geshtapalach, be an example for the, an example for the bachrim to look at that you'll at least see a Hasidic yid. So yeah, but he came to Kfar Chabad, Tafshin Lamed Gimel. I left Purim Tafshin Lamed Beis, so I missed him Kfar Chabad.
Yeah, got it. So you decide that you need to go to the source, you need to go to 770, but you want to be prepared and be able to jump right in. So that's kind of what you were doing at Kfar Chabad, I guess. So then you arrived in 770. You said Lamed Beis already.
Purim Lamed Beis, right after Purim Lamed Beis.
And you came to learn. You came to learn in the yeshiva in 770.
I come in, see the Rebbe walk into Ma'ariv, make a bracha shachiyanu. Things start from there.
Okay, so go. Start. I'm ready. So what happened when you came Tafshin Lamed Beis the day after Purim? Tell me about that experience.
Look, so being accepted in 770 was like I had a pasuk from yeshiva, but after they never had Baal Teshuvos coming into 770 straight. They had people who were raised in Lubavitch. Yeah, they had a couple from way before who went to Lubavitch high schools as kids, and so they grew up in the system. That a guy, 20 years old, I learned Kfar Chabad, and I'm now here. I can learn. Take me to yeshiva. It was Rev David Raskin was like I see you. He looks at my settle. So I see that they want me to take you in, but I don't know. Why don't you try Hadar Torah? And I said, no, I'm not interested in Hadar Torah. I'm able to learn with the best of the Boca that you have. It was a little bit back and forth. Luckily, that year, that was Tafshin Lamed Beis. At that point, that was Yudach Nisan Agadol, Shnas Hashivim. I mean, now there have been other Yudach Nisan Agadol since then, but that was Yudach Nisan Agadol. A lot of people from Kfar Chabad came in for Shnas Hashivim. So, the people who knew me from Kfar Chabad were able to convince Rev David to accept me, and especially at that time, directly after Pesach that year, they opened in Chovevei Torah, and they needed, instead of having the Zal downstairs as it is now downstairs at 770, they opened Chovevei Torah. So everybody wanted to go there. I mean, nobody wanted to go there.
Right. But they never spoke about it then. But yeah.
Yeah. So Mayim Tachtonim Bochim, and I wasn't so sensitive to learning in 770 at that point. So I was, okay, this is where the Shiva wants you to go. You go. And so because of that, I got close to Reb Mendlik, who that was his project to a certain extent, Chovevei Torah. So Baruch Hashem. Also, Reb Mendlik was a very interesting person because he was reviewed Ava's prize Talmud.
Yudeber.
Yeah, this was the whole method of learning a Rishon, seeing L'shitaso, which reviewed Ava taught. If you look in the Sharas Yehuda, which is left from him, Reb Mendlik picked that up. He took it also to Achronim, and he was very interested in conveying this to somebody. There weren't too many people who were interested in learning from him. What can I tell you? This is there were people who learned in France. The Fesners, the Bolshanskis, Yidden who, Kalmansons, people who learn the Goldbergs, people who learned in France, the Rosh Yeshivas there. They had a Schnitten Nigla, which was this, and they were the Bali Nigla of 770. A couple of Israelis who, because of the familiarity of Israel, they also were Bali Nigla. But there were no Americans who were Bali Nigla. They didn't like it.
Mm-hmm.
And Mendick was very happy to find somebody who was interested in listening to him. And he had a very solid way of teaching you how to learn. You want to learn how to learn an Achron. He was amazing. Methodical, slow, to show you how Ksos works, to show, it was just very beautiful to watch and learn from. I don't know why other people didn't get excited by it. I did.
I was going to say, I heard a lot of people talk about Rabbi Mentlik. I haven't heard such an analysis of his shiurim like I'm hearing from you.
Look, Rabbi Mentlik was a father to Bachrim. He used to care for, he didn't have any children of his own. He used to care for Bachrim as his own kids. Really. If you felt, if you didn't have a coat, Rabbi Mentlik noticed that. Things like that, he was very careful about. And everybody knew him for that. Everybody knew him for, his Kabbalah soul for the Rebbe. I mean, a beautiful story. I was once giving a shiur or whatever in a conservative shul in New Jersey. The rabbi of the shul was in New York. He picked me up. We drove to New Jersey for an hour together. So we're talking to him. He says, why'd you invite me? He says, well, I'm kind of interested in Chassidus. Says, what sparks your interest? Says, well, I went to farbrengens once. He says, oh, really? If what sparked your interest? After all, you don't understand Yiddish. Yeah, I'll tell you what really sparked my interest. There was one man, tall, a little bit heavy set, standing by the Rebbe, and he stood there with absolute intention, like a soldier, focused totally on. When I said, if I saw a person who could have such concentration by watching the Rebbe, how that happens interested me, and that's why I was interested. And that's what's interested me in Chassidus.
Right.
In other words, Mendick makaver the Yid just by being who he was. But yeah, it's really unfortunate. People didn't understand him as a teacher. Again, that's in general. Like Americans never picked up on learning Nigla.
The American Bachrim, you're saying?
Still is. Yeah.
So, okay, so you were Kabbalah from Rabbi Mentlik in Nigla. But you mentioned earlier that when you were Kfar Chabad, that there was a lack of, I don't know what the word is, but the Chassidus was more in the Aveda aspect of it, and there's more to it. So I imagine you met the Rabbi Eli in 770.
So no, I had friends. Rabbi Eli at that time, he didn't give shiurim in 770. Private Bachrim used to come to him at home and elsewhere. He didn't teach at 770 at that point. But he taught in Ocean Parkway. There was a Kfutza of Bachrim 770 who were sent to Ocean Parkway each year to be kind of there wasn't a term shluchim then, but that's today. That's the idea of sending bachrim shluchim. That same concept. So there's a group of bachrim who were sent there, and Yo would come to the Ocean Parkway to teach. So I realized that if I wanted to hear Yo, and I therefore wanted to go to Ocean Parkway. Luckily, I had a very, because of my relationship with Rabbi Mentlik, I was able to sort that out. So he did that for me, and Baruch Hashem. And I remember the first class Rabbi Eli gave was nothing special. I mean, said a mimer, touched it, said it, touched it, touched it, schmuck, but nothing special. Second class, we learned about Yudaita at that time. And the point that he was teaching was, see, the kalim are malimas apnimius and magalimas etzchisonius. That the ore which encloses itself in the kalim, the inner dimension of the ore is hid, and only the outer dimension is revealed. And he started to explain that. He asked the question. I forget exactly the question, but he asked the question, and he wanted Baruch him to answer it. Now, most of the guys were like, they knew Rabbi was playing with them. They didn't want to answer because he's just playing with them. But I wanted the class to move, so he's waiting for someone to answer. So I'm not embarrassed. I'm personally embarrassed. He'll probably shoot me down, but who cares? Let's get the show on the road. Right. So, and I had actually learned the mimer, which was focusing on that same subject that morning. So I repeated exactly what it said in that mimer. So Rabbi Eli says, yes, that's, there's nothing wrong with what you're saying, but there's a logical development that's lacking from that. That you got to go this point and that point, and then, so how do you deal with that? I didn't have any answers to his question. So everybody else had any answers, nobody else had any answers. And he went around. So it gets back to my original question. And so people were playing with him again. Again, there was still a degree of, like he's pushing you. Okay, somebody's got to say something. So something goes further. Anyway, ultimately, finally, he starts, pushing this guy down, pushing that guy down. And I get very upset. This is taken half an hour already. He hasn't said anything yet. He's just. So I go out, get the mimer I was learning that I had learned that morning. I read the mimer. I say, this is what it says here in the mimer. This is the pshat. He says, yes. He says, yes, the mimer knows pshat. But tell me, can you answer the questions I asked you in the first place? Says, no. So if you can't answer them, then you haven't understood. Yes, you repeated the mimer, but you didn't understand what it said. As they say in Hebrew, the coin fell. You knew exactly that Chassidus isn't just saying those words over again, repeating the truths which the Rebbe says. It's assimilating them to your own understanding, putting them in your own words, able to explain it to another person who doesn't necessarily know Chassidus. And Rabbi Eli taught that. And, how should I put it? That's what I try to do, personally. And I thank God because, you're always a gift.
So for you, that was like a new experience that you hadn't yet experienced earlier in Kfar Chabad or whatever. That was a new experience for you.
Yol was a new experience for every person who ever took him seriously. There's a very big difference between Divrei Rab and Divrei Talmud. When the Rebbe speaks Chassidus, it's a little. What can I tell you? No matter how much Chabad speaks about taking the ore of the Baal Shem Tov and putting it into a conceptual framework that everyone can understand, by the Rebbeim, it's Rebbe Touger. For Chassidim, to make it real for them, it has to be taken a little bit further, taken from. There's a beautiful article written by Chassidim. Chassidim was among the other things. He was also the editor to Rebbe Tomim. Now, Shalom Beberisova wrote a translation of Boca Chivrim. Boca Chivrim is written in Yiddish, a very gruntige Yiddish, a very street Yiddish, the kind of a Yiddish which many people who know Yiddish don't understand it because it's too street Yiddish for them to understand. So Shlomo Beberisova translated it into Lashon Kodesh. When Chatzkel wanted to publish Shlomo Berisova's Chassidus, he had a big problem. Because was a Rebbe sagt Chassidus, nicht a Chassid. Chassidus is a Rebbe's domain to say, not a Chassid. And he writes a very clear exposition. He says, when the Rebbe sagt Chassidus, das ist Elokus in Seichel, nicht Seichel of Elokus. When the Rebbe says Chassidus, it's not human intellect looking at an intimate God. It's an intimate God coming into human intellect. So the problem is, though, when you have human God coming into infinite, into mortal intellect, it's not quite mortal intellect yet. A human being has to break that down into his own words, into his own musagim, his own conceptual framework, so that he can understand. Yol did that. I mean, obviously, the Rebbe gave him the tools. Like people don't realize how much of, quote, Yol's explanations are found in a Sicha there and a Maimon there, etc. That said, the way he formulated it was something very unique. Again, he had a tradition. He had heard from his teachers, from Moshe Garari, from many people who had studied the Maskilim from the previous generations. But he was unique. And so not many people really, like a lot of people, he didn't speak, it wasn't easy to listen to him. Not everybody could grasp him. For push intellectually, he was a little bit abstract. And his speaking tone was not the easiest to grasp. So they didn't always chop what he was saying. And I was amazed. In the last 20 years of his life, he would say a shir in Shabbos morning, 7 in upstairs in 7. The last place was upstairs in 788. Maybe 25 people came to it. Think about that for a second. Yo was saying Chassidus. He's explaining it beautifully, as only he can. And 25 people were able to get out of their bed Shabbos morning wanting to come, and only 25. I was just amazed. I mean, I used to come in often, especially just to hear him, just hear that cheer. I wasn't living in Crown Heights at that time.
His Friday night cheer had a bigger attendance, though.
Yeah, but first of all, Friday night cheer, because it was it had to be attended. It was like, but it was Seder Yeshiva, and what else were we going to do?
Right.
But also, it was packed, but it wasn't super packed. Come on, let's be honest. And probably maybe 60, 70 Bochrim of the 200 Bochrim, 200 plus Bochrim in Yeshiva. Again, couldn't hear all that well easily also, but it had a better attendance than the Shabbos morning. Shabbos morning was basically for Balabatim. But Bekitzer, not everybody tuned into Yol. But if you did, you got something from it. You learned to think through Chassidus. And that made a very difference.
Oh.
Difference between, it's cute because there was nobody who spoke Kabbalah's all more than Yoel. Nobody spoke of Rebbe more than Yoel. But he did it in a way where this wasn't just rallying around the flag. Oh, we got to do it. No, it wasn't just. It was a message that came from the inside to the outside. Not, oh, we've got to do this. We've got to do this.
Good. Okay, it's very fascinating. So I want to hear also a little bit, you talk about Divrei Harav and Divrei HaTalmud. Let's talk a little bit about the Divrei Harav. So you arrive Purim, or after Purim Lamed Beis. What was that experience, seeing the Rebbe for the first time and subsequent farbrengens? What was that like for you?
Look, I had to learn this. What can I tell you? Wasn't brought up in Lubavitch home. I heard a lot about the Rebbe. I had to learn what it means to be, what it means. First of all, here the idea to listen to a farbrengen for 2, 3, 4 hours. Americans don't do that. I mean, if an American hears a speech that's an hour long, he's tired. He doesn't want to listen anymore. That's just, the best no speaker is supposed to speak for more than 45 minutes. Okay, so there was punctuated by nigunim, etc., but the ability to halt kaf through a whole farbrengen, that required training, and that took time, and you wanted to do it. So if this is where you are, you want to be able to chap that, but it was very hard. It was a hard skill to pick up.
What was there still like a language barrier for you at that point, or it wasn't the language? It was the teichen.
There's a little bit of a language barrier, but not so much. Language barrier I picked up more or less early, but just hey, how many people can sit and sit? Watching is definitely different from being there. But show me people who sit through a video of farbrengen today. I mean, without fidgeting, rapt attention, focused. Sure. It is not an easy skill, and you wanted to know what the Rebbe said. And of course, Chazarah was a very big thing. You wanted to be like, if this is, like. I always had an achievement orientation. So, if Chazarah, if it's, so if Chazarah is important, so I want to be able to do that also. And it was very cute. Like, I was never very good at following mamish word for word, but I was very good at ideas. I could get the binyan of a sicha. So quite often by Chazarah, it was like other guys, my job in Chazarah was often, what's the flow? What was the next stage in the farbrengen?
You're saying so not so much the memory of the wording that the Rebbe used, but like what's the hemshech, basically the hemshech inyanim.
Yeah, the hemshech ideas. Because
I've actually heard your name when people describe Chazarah those years. I've heard your name mentioned as a contributor.
Yeah, like I said, I was not like, there were people who were very good at following the words. My emphasis in Chazarah was the hemshech inyanim, and found the flow of the farbrengen and the way the ideas one led to the other.
So you were able to do that within a short time of you coming to 770?
Yeah, once I picked up the Rebbe's Yiddish. I mean, you gotta understand, the Rebbe's Yiddish, I still can't speak a good Balabatish Yiddish. like the.
So how do you communicate with
you ask
Yale
me-
and all these people? Rabbi Mentlik.
First of all, Rabbi Yoel, I used to communicate a lot with in Hebrew. Yoel loved speaking Hebrew because that's his natural. That was his natural language as a kid. I mean, he was born in Russia. In Russia, his parents probably spoke Russian at home for a while. Well, he also spoke Russian, but you know, he liked speaking Hebrew. He was cute, so I would speak in Hebrew. But I also learned Yiddish. But the Yiddish of Chassidus and the Yiddish, I'm saying the Balabatish
Like the
Yiddish,
street Yiddish, like
how to get, to serve supper in Yiddish is very hard for me. To when I was teaching, when I was raising my kids, we taught. We spoke to them in Yiddish till they were age 6. At that point, I said, "Wait a second! I want to be able to communicate with my kids."
It's important.
So when they got to Chassidus, but just everyday stuff. We switched from Yiddish then.
So back to the Rebbe. So you're saying the Rebbe's Yiddish is what?
It's half Gemara, half Kabbalah, half Kabbalah. It's not about the Yiddish.
Well, I remember as a kid, I knew Yiddish as a kid, and then I listened to Sicha, I didn't understand three quarters
exactly.
of it.
And I was the opposite. Right. Because I was able to understand the Aramaic, the Gemara, and the Kabbalah. I was therefore able to get the idea of this.
Right. So it's very fascinating. I mean, it's very fascinating that you were able to pick that up within a short time. By the way, in the Rebbe's Yiddish, I was listening recently to a few Yechidison. There's a few that are recorded. In the Yechidus, the Rebbe does speak a little more of that, the conversational Yiddish. It's much harder. It's a lot more high, the vocabulary. Not even the vocabulary. The expressions that the Rebbe uses is very different than the Sichos. So you come to 770 and you're totally in. You're listening to Rabbi Eli. You're by the farbrengens. So what was when you heard the Rebbe speak? What was the new? I mean, you said that when you were Kfar Chabad, everything was the Rebbe, but they don't know what it's all about. When you come to 770 and you're hearing from the Rebbe directly,
it's real.
So what is it?
It's real. One of the classic things is that an emeint was gesagt, he means what he says. You can hear a person speaking honestly. He's not just talking about a dream, a goal. The Rebbe, whatever he said was very real for him, and therefore it was very real for you. And it's like that was what, as Bachrim, Mitzrayim meant something to us. Why? Because when the Rebbe said, "Yet that he is so ligan tefillin," that every Jew should put on tefillin. Oh yeah, so that's part of our job to go out and go on the street and make sure that every Jew puts on tefillin. When the Rebbe said every Jewish child should go to a camp, a Jewish camp, and that's actually like the first thing I did in Sach. This was Shavuos Lamed Gimel. The Rebbe spoke about Mifi Olam V'Yom Kim Yisara to Os. It's right before the half year before the Yom Kippur War. He started speaking Mifi Olam V'Yom Kim Yisara to Os. It's a classic. It's now in the annals of Lubavitch history, quote unquote. The Rebbe, quote, knew the Yom Kippur War before half a year before it was happened, and gave the inner message to defeat the enemy beforehand. We didn't quite understand what was happening in the Ruchnius and what was happening in the future developments. We just know that Rebbe said something. We took it seriously. And I remember going up to David Raskin afterwards. David and I have become friends over the year. Because again, David took the Rebbe. There was no... when they titled the book about David, Abdi David, And that's really what it was. There was no person who wasn't the Rebbe's Eved like David Raskin. I mean, this, when the Rebbe said something, it was real. David took that, boom. So I remember going to David. So we have to get every kid, and we have to go out and try to do something. He says, so what do we do? I says, look, let's develop a program that where we can get kids into camp. We'll go around to every Jewish school, Hebrew school, educational, day school, put up flyers on the streets, and every Jewish kid in New York will get the Rebbe's message. That was a little bit of an overstatement. We didn't actually do that, but we hit every official place, every official school got the Rebbe's message. We rented seven cars going all over New York City to do this. I remember David being excited. 7 cars doing the Rebbe's, 7 chariots for the Rebbe's word. It was inspireless at that time because nobody had ever done that before. But yeah, what made it happen? Bochrim who took the Rebbe seriously. And the same thing that year, the Rebbe spoke about Hanukkah, that every Jew should have a menorah. Oh, every Jew should have a menorah. So we went out, we bought up, we went all to every Jewish Judaica store, so I bought up all menorahs, gave out menorahs on the street. Then we ran out after a couple of days. There was no more menorahs to buy. And David knew somebody who had a metal factory. We made our own. He made special menorahs for us.
Those are the famous Mivtzoyim menorahs. That's when they were created.
Thousands of years. Yeah. Where did this come from? Because Bochrim heard the Rebbe, and they said, "Oh, he means what he says. Let's make it happen." That was what that was the spirit of the Bochrim that started at that time. In other words, it was unique energy, which beforehand there wasn't that same degree of manpower, and I would say, whatever, the flexibility wasn't there. We got it done, and that's what's that's what started. Tanks was not the Rebbe's initiative. Tanks was the Bochrim's initiative. Everything, all these things, the Rebbe pushed it, but the Rebbe said something, Bochrim thought how to apply it, and we got it done. And that changed Lubavitch into like, oh, when the Rebbe says something, he means it, and we mean it. We're going to try to make it happen. That was the spirit of going, like it, and it was semi-new at that time. I mean, like, no people have been talking like this, but they never did it. Now we did it.
Right.
I mean, Mitzvah Tulin had been there before, but it wasn't quite with the same energy as this. So you went out for Friday morning, Friday afternoon. You went out to Tulin. You're out, but there wasn't. It didn't. It was a personal thing. It wasn't have the tnufa, the energy that these later Mitzvahim did.
Right, and those were happening all your years. Let me ask you another question about the Sichos. Besides those Sichos, when the Rebbe speaking about Mivtzoyim and all those things, but my other question is about what about the Rebbe Sichos and Torah, like the Rashi Sichos, the Memorim, the Siyumim that the Rebbe makes. What was that to you that was different from what you heard from a Rosh Hashiva or from other people?
Look, You look at the Yonah Torah Chasidus. What the Rebbe explains there with Moda'ani, like that's a classic, and he does it in all four, in the full parties of Torah. But really, every Rashi and every Rambam, when it's magnified by Pnimius Torah, it's a different Rashi and a different Rambam. And so that's why so many people have great Torah scholars will look at the Rebbe's Rambams, and some of them pick it up and say, "Wow," and some of them pick it up and they put it down because this is a whole new way of thinking of Rambam. So the Rebbe's Rashi. When the Rebbe's, when ArtScroll put out a translation of Rashi, and they didn't put it in anything from the Rebbe, part of that was political, but part of it was, quite honestly, that just the Rebbe's way of thinking, the Rebbe's way of reading a Rashi is so radically different from the way they do. It was hard for them to understand, and therefore it didn't go in. In other words, it was a whole new approach. That's one of the things, I actually want to go into. What we've done in translating the Sichos is that we've shaped it. On one hand, we're very true to the original. We have a very clear, it's face-to-face translations. There's no deviation from the source. On the other hand, there's plenty of explanation so that a person who's not familiar with that style can understand what the Rebbe is doing. And that's very important because, as I said before, the Ibergang, the transition from Elokus and the Elokus Kukt of Seichel to how a normal person understands, it's a transition. And it's taking the way the Rebbe understands something and putting into an American conceptual framework requires a certain shaping. And you learn to do it yourself. But if the text if that can be made available, and that's what we try to do in our translations, it's very valuable.
Okay, so maybe this is a springboard that you can talk to me a little bit about Sichos in English, a little bit of how you got involved in it, and what was the seder of doing it, and what it's all about, what it takes, etc.
Okay, Sichos in English started Tafshin Lamed Ches, that's 1978. I actually wasn't in New York at that time. I was at Sichos in Cleveland. Probably started Tafshin Lamed Zayin. Actually, at that point, it was the first time there was a real large amount of Baalei Teshuva throughout America and throughout the world, for that matter. People who didn't understand Yiddish and wanted to hear it in English. That was the first time there was simultaneous farbrengens, simultaneous translations at farbrengen. And people wanted, can we get copies of what the Rebbe said? And a couple of at that time, Bochrim, David Leib Grofsbaum, Levi Weinberg, guy Menachem Kallis. There was a bunch of people who they could do this, they wanted to do it, and they started. Quite honestly, it was a little bit erratic. And so I came back from Cleveland. I was in Sichos in Cleveland as a bocher. I'd just gotten engaged. shortly after Purim. It's interesting that Purim kind of features as a transition point. But shortly after Purim, I came back to the Crown Heights right before my wedding, and they said, "Oh, well, you're here. Great, take it over. You need somebody who can do this on a regular basis. Do it." So I started. Shortly afterwards, Yona Afson came in. Yona, did the organizational work. I did the translation. Yona did the organizational work. I have to, Yona knew how to. Yona gave himself over 24/7, 365 days a year to making the project happen. I mean, guy didn't sleep. He literally had his bed in the office for many years. Really, his bed was in the Sichos in English office. That's where he was 24/7.
When he was a bacher,
making sure the most had happened. This was just like just the way it happened. So I wouldn't say that I had that. My bed wasn't in 7/7. In particular, I was just getting married at that time. But no, we started putting out the Sichos. There's still the first thing, Lamed Ches. From the second half of Lamed Ches, we got most of the Sichos. And from Lamed Tes on, we came on a regular basis.
So I have a question. What's the process of translating the Sichos in English? You're doing it from your own Chazarah, or you're copying the Hanachas that are coming out and translating the Hanachas? How does it work?
Definitely copying the Hanachas, but we were doing something like what Lahak does. I mean, actually, David Feldman used to say, "Elia, I wish I could do what you did," because we would synopsize the Sichos. It's like, on one hand, this wasn't a full translation because, hey, the Rebbe Sichos, the Yiddish were 40, 50 pages. The Hebrew is already cut down to 20, 30 pages. We wanted to get 10 pages, 15 pages in English. That's, most people can read 10, 15 pages in about half, seriously studying in about 20 minutes. That's what we wanted to get to. We didn't, when you produce a 60-page document, it's self-defeating. Nobody's going to read it.
Right. It's actually very, I use them myself. If I'm watching a farbrengen and I want basically a good synopsis of the Sicha, basically you have the whole teichen of the Sicha without every detail, just to understand the teichen. Sichos in English is great for that.
Yeah. Again, like I said, what I did in Chazarah, I did the same thing. Get a flow chart of the Rebbe's ideas and give it over. And then, since later we changed a little bit because the Rebbe was, but even in the later years, is from from Memches on, when I started, I did the Sichos from Lamed Ches to Mem, and I started again in Memches. But from even later Sichos, when we were more attentive to people at that point, we want to hear exactly what the Rebbe said. So we were more thorough in getting it like I said, not word for word, but more true loyal to the text. But you can't be totally stuck on the text. On the text, you have to, in an English audience, you have to craft it and synopsize it to a certain extent. Now, in Sichos, we don't do that. In Sichos, we give, on the contrary, we expand what the Rebbe writes, not synopsize, because It's a different process. Because the Sichos is a direct translation of what the Rebbe said, expanded. In other words, when we do a Sicha, we want to frame it in a manner which any person can more or less understand what the Rebbe says. That anybody who opens the Sichos will take a look and, hey, I can read what it says. It's a logical sense to me. The terminology, it's a little bit foreign, but it's explained there, and I can follow it and go through it step by step.
Are you aware of what the Rebbe's reaction or to this whole idea of having the Sichos in English was?
Look, the clearest reaction, this was Tefshin Lamed, this is again Tefshin Lamed Tes. We were mostly in diapers. And at that point, Reb Zalman Khan and the director of Adlefas Sichos had Emmanuel Shochet produce a translation of Lukti Sichos 1 to 5, which is in English it's 1 to 5, but in Hebrew it's in the original Yiddish it's Alpha and Beis. Now Emmanuel is Emmanuel. He's like, there's very few people like him. But so I don't know the full process of how and what, but before he published it, he put it into the Rebbe, and he asked the Rebbe's permission to publish. And the Rebbe says, Shaykh Levad Sichos in English. We got nothing better than that. In other words, that was our direct
mandate.
Stamp. Yeah. No, and later, we put out a series, Timeless Patterns in Time. The Rebbe gave us his shar. The first, these are adapted sichos. Not at all a direct translation. And the Rebbe said we could use his shar. You know what that meant? In other words, the Rebbe saw. I wouldn't say we were perfect at that time. Far from it. We were very, we needed a lot of improvement. But the Rebbe trusted us that we were going in the right direction. We wanted the community's Torah, and he felt that, these guys, Yonah, myself, other people working with us, were committed to the goal, and as we get better at it, as we work at it, we'll get better at it. Instead of, like one of the biggest problems, the people say that the enemy of good is not bad, it's excellence.
Perfection, right?
People, yeah. If you're not perfect, we can't publish you. No, the Rebbe was very much get it out, get the message over. The message will be effective. It'll do something, and we'll go from there.
Right. I'm saying, and the idea of making the Sichos accessible to the English-speaking crowd. I mean, this is a major step in Afatzas Hamayanos. I mean, it's.
Look, how many Sichos did Rebbe speak about Shivim Lashon, and somebody finally did that.
And in recent years, you've been the set of the Sichos that you're working on now, which is a total new project, a new access that it gives to people to the Rebbe's Torah, right? That's the most current and recent endeavor that you've been involved in.
Yeah. Baruch Hashem. Yeah, it's an amazing thing, and we did 6 volumes where we showcase the Rebbe first on every parsha, and then on every yontiv. Selections from Lukti Sichos. That's the blue set that people are getting to know now. And the last 2 years, we've been working on Aleph and Beis, hopefully by Tishrei, Alf and Beis will come out. We're now on the final proofs.
Is that the plan to go Al Seder, to translate to look at the Sichos?
Let's put it this way. We did Alf and Beis. Now we're on Gimel and Daled. I've got questions afterwards. What's exactly whether we should continue, we don't continue. Quite not. Just like Alf and Beis and Gimel and Daled, there was a gap between before Chayil Hay came out. Before the Rebbe started editing those Sichos, which became Hay to Tess. And those Sichos are totally different, with a different goal than Alf and Beis. So again, I don't know if we're going to go what's the next stage after Dalet. That's already a inner.
I mean, eventually everything is going to be translated at some point.
Well, yes, but because look, this is one of my points in translation. If you have a physics textbook in Yiddish, can you and I understand it? Mostly not. In other words, you have to know the jargon of the subject before you understand it. So when you're doing a Rambam or even an intricate Rashi, is that shaykh to everybody, or is it shaykh to somebody who is a student of that? Now, on one hand, obviously, if the Rebbe said the Sikha, edited the Sikha, it's shaykh to everybody. On the other hand, that's Tachton is a shaykh to everybody. That's our internal debate.
Right. But one second, you just touched on something. The Rambam you actually did translate in its entirety. What was that about?
Yeah, look, the Rambam I translated in entirety, because the Rebbe wanted people to learn it. And again, this is something where I took the Rebbe seriously. Nobody else did, except Chanoch Bakshal.
He's
beautiful.
He's the one that published it.
Yeah. I remember his words, will this make the Rebbe happy? I said, the Rebbe will be overjoyed. See, if there's like a gate on them when we're going on this. But the Rambam was a specific thing. You're learning Rambam. Right. Now Lubavitchers learn Rambam. Nobody else in the world learns Rambam. And this is the unique thing of the Rebbe. And shifting subjects a little bit, but a Rosh Yeshiva learns a Rambam when he has kasha. He wants to make a pilpul and cook the Rambam either because he wants to understand how Rambam looks at the Gemara, or mostly because he wants to make his pilpul and put the Rambam in his pilpul. One or two of the other, but it's not learning Rambam as Rambam. Rambam, he wrote his book to be learned ala seder, to know 613 mitzvahs, that you should go from Torah shebichtav to Torah shebal peh, and this is shleimus Torah shebal peh. So every kid from 10 to 15 should learn my sefer. That's what he writes in his Hakdama. Nobody ever did that had that sense of learning Rambam. Well, they do actually do that in Yemen, in Teiman. They did in Teiman for many years, but definitely outside of that small community in Teiman, who really, they actually follow the Rambam as halacha. But everybody else in the yeshiva community never learned Rambam. That's a new revolutionary concept of Rambam. That, just learn it, Keseder, so you want to understand the 613 mitzvahs. The Rebbe was mechadish that in Rambam. This is mechadish Rashi is Pshuto Shemikra. There's a board. The Rebbe had 3 teachers. If you hear, who are the 3 people that Rebbe would always mention by farbrengens? Rashi, Rambam, and the Rogatchover. Mm-hmm. How there's the Torah Bechal is divided to Mikra, Torah Shebichtav, Rashi, Pshuto Shemikra. Torah Shebal Peh, redacted halacha, Rambam. Gemara, not the book of Gemara, but the thought process of the Gemara. Who convinces that the Rogachever. And the Rebbe was. That's the Rebbe. The Rebbe in all those things. Yes, the Rebbe would have mentioned everybody, but Rashi, Rambam, the Rogachever, because in these three disciplines, he was dedicated to each the king of each three. Yeah.
And
so
go ahead.
Taking when the Rebbe speaks of Rambam, it's a totally different Rambam than the actual. Let's put it this way: it's Piyuto Shel Rambam. On the other hand, and it's taking the Rambam in a much deeper way than you would get it just from the text. Rambam, the text is just to teach how to do the mitzvah. The Rebbe is deeper than the most than Rav Chaim or anything else. In the sense, he's taking it much deeper. But yeah, he's focusing ultimately on what the Rambam wants. But yeah, so going into when a Sikha on a Rambam is really, you have to get into the Rebbe's motives, way of thought. So is that shaykh for everybody? I don't know. On a constant basis, we have, we do samples of how the Rebbe does, so you can see how the Rebbe attacks a Rambam. We have samples of Rashi. But most of our Sichos are focused on the Avodas Hashem, because quite honestly, that's what people are looking for. Want to see how the Rebbe taught you how to face life's questions, answer the personal issues that you come up in relationships. So
you're assuming that someone that wants to learn a Rashi Sicha or a Nigla Sicha probably is able to look at the original? Is that the assumption?
To do it well, yeah, you have to. I mean, just like I said, to learn a psychology textbook or learn a textbook in physics, you've got to be somewhat of an expert in that. So yeah, if we give you if we'll spell out a specific sicha, we do that, we have it. But to do every Rashi sicha, you really got to be into Rashi to do that. So that's my own personal question, whether we actually will do that or not.
Right. So my question is, do you think it's beneficial for someone that is learning in yeshivas or Lubavitcher and grew up in that system, and he knows Lashon Kodesh well, he can read the original? Is there a benefit for him to utilizing things from Sichos in English for his own understanding, or it's not necessary?
Look, let's step back. I got grandkids. Go to Lubavitch high schools. My grandkids, unfortunately, don't know Yiddish perfectly. Some of them yes, some of them no. Even those who do, are not perfect in it. A lot of them are not. They're all fluent in English. Their English is better. Even those who know Yiddish, their English is better than Yiddish. So in Eretz Yisrael, the people who are learning, who they speak Hebrew, they're learning the Sichos in translations, into Lashon Kodesh. People think, it's in English. There's nicht heilig. The holiness is gone. On the contrary, I look at that as a mila. You're right. The holiness is gone. You start to understand. It's very easy when it's a holy text. In text, you're saying
heilig.
Lernt the Gemara. You sagt, was the Gemara sagt. Ich verstehe gar nicht kein Wort. I'm learning the Gemara, but I'm sing-songing. It'll go along. And I don't understand a single word that I'm saying. If you read it in English, you're forced to look at the words and understand what they say. And that's what the Rebbe wanted us to do, I think, to understand what he meant. So yeah. Now, so I think at a beginning stage, it is definitely very valuable to, again, we have facing translations. So you're not, we're not telling you not to learn the Yiddish. It's 2 columns on the same page. Not even, it's not even 1 page on the other page.
Look at the Sichos,
2 columns on the same page. Yeah. So that, that it's the same.
By the way,
text.
I think that was an amazing. I don't know whoever's decision that was. That was an amazing chiddush of this latest volume. It's not
spotlight design. They're like I have to I remember some of us argue with them because it's easier to read English as a separate page, and their vort, and they were right about it. Is that no? We want people to go back and forth.
No, but it also makes it like. You don't have to be, it's English, forget about it, or it's Hebrew. Like anyone can open the Sefer and utilize it, yeah.
And you see immediately that the Hebrew and the Yiddish, or the Yiddish and the English are connected one to the other. So that's, Baruch Hashem. That's the ultimate goal there. But so again, I'm not saying that the person should read only the English, forget about the original. And definitely, excuse me, as you go deeper into the text, there definitely is an advantage in seeing Lashon Harav, seeing the nuances of the original that you can't really get in English. 100%.
Right.
Having said that, I have friends who read my translations and they know Yiddish. Hey, what you did here is amazing. I understand the Sicha much better than I did in the original because we taught it. I mean, we've got an amazing staff. I mean, this isn't all my own. Shalom Weinberg adds, Shalom Zirkin adds, Shmuley Afson, his brother Zalman Meir. We've got a bunch of people working on this. Solid minds who each one puts in their own effort to make this work accessible and understand, and that there's, the full depth of what the Rebbe is saying is there. I don't know if he can't be perfect, but like I said, I have friends who understand what they didn't understand the Sicha very well. And look at what we did is to say, this is amazing. Yeah.
Okay. Definitely a major. I mean, the vast the volume of what you've done is pretty remarkable. And Yarech Yomim Mamlachte should continue being Mefetz the Mayanis Chutza. And I really appreciate this conversation. It's very, very intriguing. Yeshakayach.
Okay, Yeshakayach. Good talking to you.